broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's WilmsFront Snapshot news show, coming to you on this Tuesday, the 2nd of June, 2026. We are live on the WilmsFront YouTube channel. Hello to everyone watching. It is 8:30 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria. Sorry again for the later start. We begin tonight with you could call it breaking news. One Nation has hit the front in the latest opinion polls. The main one that has got all the attention is the Redbridge ascent, which is headed by that former assistant Victorian Labor State Secretary, Kos Samaras. And to you, I'll say this in a Brian Taylor commentary AFL voice. One Nation have hit the front. Can you believe it? 31% primary vote, up 4 points. Labor down 3 points, 28. This is their first poll since the budget. The Coalition down to 20%. So much for the spring in Angus Taylor and Matt Canavan's step. The Greens are still struggling on 12%. The others, which maybe includes the Teals, are up to 9%. Now, despite the combined One Nation and Coalition vote being 51%, after preferences, Labor is still ahead, two-party preferred, 51-49. It's the same if the Coalition is the second party, 49, and One Nation, 49. So that soundbite of Angus Taylor's "if the vote sprays, Labor stays." This is because it's Labor and the Greens, their voters have strong preference discipline, but particularly One Nation voters in history haven't. And there's obviously some new One Nation voters who would never preference the Coalition, and there'd be some Liberal remaining voters who would never preference One Nation. Now, the preferred Prime Minister, Albanese, has taken another hit to 31%, still leading Pauline Hanson in second place, 25%, and Angus Taylor down at 14%. Unsure, though, is still at 30%. But you look at net favourability, so minus 19 for Albanese, and there is minus 4 each for Canavan, but Hanson is at net 0. So for somebody who for 30 years had supposedly been so divisive, she has the best net favourability rating out of all of the major party leaders, and Larissa Waters of the Greens. And now Pauline Hanson appeared on a Sunday Agenda on Sky News with Andrew Clenaug. Now, the Redbridge opinion poll came out on the Sunday night in the Australian Financial Review. So certainly it was embargoed on the Sunday morning, but Clenaug asked her if she would be willing to become Prime Minister, and she said, "I won't knock the job because I believe that I have the ability to do it." And it was Pauline Hanson's 72nd birthday last week, and she had a birthday visitor in Clive Palmer. She posted, "Look who's coming to visit me on my birthday bearing gifts. I really appreciate the gesture." Now, obviously, we're all familiar with Clive Palmer's New Deal ads for the United Australia Party. Maybe Clive is finally coming around and realizing that the New Deal for Australia that he is seeking was in front of him this entire time. Now, obviously, Gina Rinehart, another mining magnate, is a significant personal and financial backer. Obviously, the $1 million sexy plane that she donated to Pauline Hanson, which Hanson has defended, saying that it doesn't cost the taxpayers anything for her to go on the jet to all parts of Australia. And this was her defence to critics such as Labor's chief head kicker, Murray Watt, who slammed her Senate estimates attendance record. So she's been absent 88% of Senate estimates. Now, Pauline Hanson has said that bureaucrats, they're told not to answer the question, and so she believes that she were better off travelling around the state of Queensland, who she represents in the Senate, and listening to voters. Obviously, Malcolm Roberts, he does a great job of questioning the bureaucrats in Senate estimates. So One Nation is taking the bureaucrats to task. Now today, Paul Kelly, he's the old dinosaur at the Australian, its editor-at-large, said that Pauline Hanson is not fit to be Prime Minister of Australia. She's not equipped to do the job. She can't do the jobs, and claims that she can be a lot worse than Albo, and claims that at some point Australian common sense and resilience and capacity has to assess politics, has got to come into play with someone sensible assessments of the limitations of Pauline Hanson. Now, the Australian newspaper, their old political reporter Dennis Shanahan has also been critical of Pauline Hanson over the years. I mean, the Australian newspaper is the coalition cheer squad, and they have been responsible for a lot of hit pieces on One Nation and its operations. Now, as I mentioned last week, Tony Abbott is back in a senior position in the Liberal Party as the federal Liberal president. Now, obviously, there is history between those two, because back 30 years ago, Tony Abbott launched the Australian for Honest Politics Fund, and that was designed to bankroll court action by disgruntled One Nation candidates and members. Now, Tony Abbott was asked by Peter Credlin last night about how he would approach Pauline Hanson this time. Now, he said that he wouldn't criticise somebody who'd shown so much resilience over the years, and that the bad Labor government, the worst in modern history, so even worse than the Rudd-Gillard government that he defeated. So he and Pauline, they did have a public I would say many years ago when she invited Tony Abbott to launch her book. They had a reconciliation of sorts, and Pauline Hanson said that if Nelson Mandela can forgive his prisoners, then surely she can as well. Pauline Hanson once said that she would never forgive Tony Abbott. Now, he didn't directly lead to her imprisonment, but it set the chain of events in motion. And Tony Abbott said to Pauline Hanson, second time around, you're always better. Now, can Tony Abbott help turn the Liberal Party from being a rump? Because there was that Redbridge accent MRP poll last week, which showed that Labor would scrape home with a majority of 76 out of 150. One Nation 53, and the Liberals 12. The Nationals completely wiped out, which was really weird why the Nationals called for a new election last week for Anthony Albanese to get a mandate for his tax changes, which Angus Taylor calls toxic taxes, which is borrowing Tony Abbott's phrase about Julia Gillard's carbon tax. The Nationals would be wiped out. They have a political death wish right now. Now, Tony Abbott, when he was opposition leader and prime minister, he was the messiah of the Liberal Party boomer base. I remember the talkback calls, "Oh, Tony Abbott's so lovely." And, well, we saw how much of a disappointment he was at Prime Minister. His address to the Liberal Party Federal Executive, it was still better than anything that Angus Taylor has said, and so really leaves him in the shadow. Tony Abbott's more the shadow opposition leader at the moment because Angus Taylor needs a script. Although he did have you could say, an organic moment in Question Time last week when he muttered that Albanese was an arrogant prick. That's the most naturally animated I've seen him, which he had to withdraw. Jacinda Ardern was once caught on a hot mic calling ACT Party leader David Seymour, who's now the Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand, an arrogant prick. That must be a trans-Tasman, a political frustration about your opponents. So Angus Taylor, he needs a script in front of him. Now, as I mentioned, Tony Abbott, he was the darling of the boomers, but the boomers, they still support the Liberal Party over One Nation, but the boomers are dying as we speak. We'll get to Australia's population increase, and this is another thing why One Nation are surging. And even though under Angus Taylor and Federal President Tony Abbott's trying to sell Angus Taylor as I've mentored him personally. He's my boy. You can trust him to be good. But from Generation X to younger, One Nation is the preferred party of the centre-right over the coalition. And the polls show that voters believe that One Nation is the party best tackled to reduce mass migration. The Australian Bureau of Statistics has said that we have just ticked over to a population of 28 million. It estimates that a person arrives to live in Australia every 59 seconds. So every minute of this show, another person will arrive. And so that's an overall population increase of one person every 1 minute and 15 seconds. However, there is only one birth every 2 minutes and 16 seconds and one death every 3 minutes and 33 seconds. So Australians who are here already are dying at a faster rate at replacement. And according to a population survey, 1 in 4 women aged 18 to 45 say they will not have children. Single child families are becoming more common. 25% of those aged 35 to 45 reportedly only have one child. Australia's fertility rate is forecast to fall to a record low of just 1.42 children per woman. And this is well below the 2.1 births per woman needed to replace the population from one generation to the next. We are not yet the catastrophic levels of Japan and South Korea of even less than one child per woman. And of course, the solution being sold to Japan and South Korea because of their aging population is mass migration. Now, this is the main driver of One Nation support. Obviously, Gen Xers, they remember Pauline Hanson from 30 years ago. They would have been teenagers at the time. They're the ones that say she's been consistent for 30 years and she's been proved right. Now, I'm not sure if anyone has had the misfortune of meeting One Nation's latest recruiter, albeit unintentionally. So this is Nia Maddock. So she is the founder of a racial justice organisation, Democracy in Colour. And now she was first appeared on a SBS Insight episode about the rise of One Nation. She has her own TikTok as well, where she posts anti-white content. And she was also a guest on a communist and accused rapist Tom Ballard's Serious Danger podcast.
Neha, your family migrated from India to Sydney in 1991. What has Pauline Hanson meant to you growing up in Australia?
Fear, that's the big one. When I was 6 years old, I was waiting for Dad to come home from work because, it's the 6 p.m. news. And I remember this redhead woman came on the screen. She kept going on about Asians and being swamped by Asians. And I just remember thinking, am I Asian? Am I swamping someone? And just being like, I don't understand what I've done wrong. Because at that Australia Day that same year, I had been flying the flag and been really proud and happy to be in this country. And I remember later that night when my parents thought that I was asleep and they were talking about possibly needing to leave Australia. And I just remember feeling so scared when they said that, because I just thought, I can't go anywhere else. This is the only home I've ever known. And I just remember thinking that we can never let someone decide whether myself or anyone in this country is welcome or not. No one person, no one political party should have that.
I had a horrible experience. I walked through the streets of rural Australia and all I saw were white people. I wondered to myself, what is happening to this country? It used to be Aboriginal land. But everywhere I turn, there are these pale-ass looking ghosts. How have they lasted here this long? Their skin isn't built for this climate. I guess that's why they all keep dying of skin cancer. So why not do the logical thing and deport yourself back to England? You won't die of skin cancer there. Then you can be native to a land, rather than complaining about Asians when you live in the Asia Pacific. It's like going to Bunnings and complaining there are lesbians there. Like, yes, you came into their house, what did you expect? But to find them there. I agree, if you don't love it, you should leave. And I, for one, love this beautiful continent. That's why I want it to be the best it can be. We can't achieve much with racist losers constantly clogging up the internet discourse. So go on, fuck off back to England.
I was on the marriage equality campaign in 2017. And at that time, we did heaps of research into, what Australians care about, all that stuff, what resonates. And the two guiding values that Australians hold dear, fairness and equality.
Ugh.
And so that's why we also decided to call it marriage equality, because Love is Love didn't resonate, because it didn't talk about fairness, it didn't talk about our mates. And so Australians were just like, what of it? But once we framed it in, this is about everyone having a fair go. This is about your colleagues and your neighbours and you all being equal. And of course, by that point, most people knew a queer person. People went, yeah, okay, that sounds fair. Interestingly, also, we were like, how do we reach migrant communities? And we went and said, Pauline Hanson is against marriage equality. And migrants were like, sign me up. We love the gays. Let's go. White women are turning to One Nation, just like they did Trump.
Oh.
We've also got first-generation migrants turning to One Nation, again, just like Trump. We're seeing the same thing happen. And because we're seeing the same thing happen, we've got the lessons. We can learn from it. But what is particularly concerning for me, right, is these are our people. We can talk to white women. We can remind them where their allegiance should lie. Because do you want to align yourself with patriarchy? Do you want to align yourself with the really insidious nature of being a trad wife?
Yes, being a trad wife where you have children instead of being childless. That is why our fertility rate has plummeted. Now, I should mention that Neha identifies as a they, them, and certainly that wouldn't be as accepted in India where they were born. And going back to what Nia said about the, I don't like to call it marriage equality, same-sex marriage campaign, claims that they were able to convert migrants to yes. The electorates that voted no were either a lot of Muslims lived there, or there was also a lot of Indians and Asians that lived there. So Indian-centric seats in Sydney, Greenway and Mitchell voted against same-sex marriage, and Bennelong, which has a lot of Asians from China and Korea, those electorates voted against same-sex marriage. And going back to what she said about the countryside, this reminds me of how in Britain there is basically this constant media stories about how the countryside is too white, and the main reason for that is because there is so many dogs there, and Muslims don't like dogs, and so there needs to be less dogs in the countryside, which is absolutely, as a dog lover myself, I think that's absolutely horrific that there should be less of man's best friend because of a culture that has been imported that doesn't value dogs. Now, don't worry, Anna, we're going to be covering the murder of Henry Novak later in the show. I didn't watch that SBS Insight story episode in full about the rise of One Nation, but they still don't know how to, neither the Albanese government or the coalition. It is becoming the rise of One Nation. Pauline Hanson, I don't know, is there a pun to call it momentum, the train? It's becoming basically a self-fulfilling prophecy, like when Trump surged in the polls in 2016. More and more Australians are believing it. But the polls also show that they believe One Nation is ready for government. Now, she was asked about her South Australian MP, Jason Virgo, who mentioned his gay Indonesian-born Muslim boyfriend in his maiden speech. She said that's his personal business, and she's more concerned about these radical imams. As I mentioned last week, if he's a gay, if he's gay, then he's not a good Muslim in the Islamic sense. So you wouldn't actually be worried about a Muslim like that. And also asked about David Farley flying the three flags in his office. Now, she was on Andrew Bolt's program last night where she claimed that the Border Mail misquoted him, and because he said we live in three worlds, we live in the world of our forefathers and those that came before us. We live in the present today, and we live in the future. I hope that we are in today's world preparing the future, in preparing future and bringing every Australian along with it, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and new immigrants. So in answering the question off the top of my head, yes. So she claims that Farley was misquoted and is only going to fly the Australian flag in his office. But what I will say, it's interesting that One Nation MPs, they're being attacked for being too far left wing and supposedly not far right enough. Obviously, One Nation will need to strike a tone which is, well, it's the party's called One Nation. We are going to be One Nation. I remember when I heard Pauline Hanson at the Put Australia First rally, it was a very moderate message, and it's basically, if you come here, fit in and assimilate, otherwise go back where you came from and I'll take you to the airport. And that's what she's been saying for 30 years. If you don't want to be Australian, go back to where you came from.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
And now, in the aftermath of the Albanese government's budget, there's hot property is finished. It's now, I wouldn't. It's the property market is cooling. Though if you said cool property, it sort of doesn't sound as dramatic as cold property. Now, this is a AI image I created on the right here of, remember, Hot Property with Michael Caton in the late 90s. And this basically kicked off when the appreciation of housing prices was a good thing, and the way that show was set up, that you wanted the people at auction to get the biggest price imaginable. But because property prices have astronomically increased, it means that they have risen from, off the top of my head, it's now just not the price of a house. It's not multiple of a weekly wage. It's from the single, like it used to be about a fifth or an eighth. It's now like 25, just the top of my head. And so the Albanese government listened to the economists who said that negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount had distorted the housing market, and that they listened to them and their base and broke their election promise to abolish negative gearing for new properties, the grandfathering that for existing negatively geared properties, and ending the 50% capital gains tax discount and changing it to inflation indexation. And now, obviously, we have interest rates at back up at 4.35%. Now, the combination of all of this has seen at the end of May, this is according to property data firm Cotalite. So the median house price fell by 0.9% in Sydney and 0.8% in Melbourne and 0.2% in Canberra for the month of May. Now, if you look at the median value, Melbourne has absolutely plummeted, is at 812,000, and it is of the mainland state capital cities is the lowest. Sydney is still at 1.28 million. Now, median property prices still increased in the rest of the major cities, so there was basically net zero of property price increase. So the median value is 941,000 at the moment, but there has been intense focus on the auction clearing rates. So for the combined capital cities was 54.5%, the lowest rate since April 2020. Auctions are being less attended by investors, and first home buyers are the ones who are there tend to be first home buyers. Morgan Stanley has forecasted that because of the federal budget, Australian house prices could fall by 5 to 10%. A fall in house prices would be very bad news for first home buyers who have used the Albanese government's 5% home deposit scheme, pushing them into negative equity, so owing the bank more than the homes are worth. Now, there was always going to be losers with this housing bubble being burst, and so the sticky goo is, to use a metaphor, going to stick to those who've just bought a home. The carnival is over, musical chairs is over, and now comedian Dave Hughes, he savaged the federal budget's impact on house prices and Albanese personally. Angry Hughesy is back.
March 2026, you've just gone all in on a $2 million house property in Australia. You voted for Albanese. He said he wasn't going to do anything to negative gearing, didn't mention anything about capital gains tax. You voted for him. So you've got your $2 million just spent on a house. Stamp duty for tin, Victoria, you're up to 2.11. So you're up for 2,110,000. So you spent 2,110,000, and you voted for Albanese because he said he wasn't going to change anything. But he lied and he changed everything. And the property market crashes, goes down 20%. So you spent 2.1 million. So now all you can get for the house is 1.6 million. You're not going to sell it, but then you lose your job and you have to sell it. And so you've just lost $500,000. You've just lost your life savings. You know why you lost your life savings? Because Albanese fucking lied.
And Hughesy has done a couple of other videos where he's savaged the Albanese government's change to the capital gains tax discount, and also against the Allen state Labor government. I'm not sure if any of you watched The Glass House on the ABC 20 years ago. Hughesy always used to start his monologue by saying, "I'm angry this week." And now, obviously, Hughesy, for most of his adult life, has been a lefty, but he started to be red-pilled during Dan Andrews' COVID lockdowns, and it seems with him greying in both the face and the hair, is becoming an older, wise man. And so I certainly welcome the awakening of Dave Hughes, and I think that because he does have a wide reach, I think that the Albanese government, they certainly don't want angry Hughesy to be constantly recording video rants against them. Now, a fall in house prices would also hinder the Albanese government's National Housing Accord target of building 1.2 million new homes over 5 years, as housing projects would become less feasible for developers, though Housing Minister Claire O'Neill has claimed Treasury modelling has shown only a mild impact of a 2% slowdown in house prices. I would never believe Treasury modelling. So she's blamed higher interest rates as the main driver. And she's also denied that the budget tax changes could force up rents as landlords would sell. And obviously it shouldn't affect existing rentals because negative gearing is grandfathered. And she's also claimed that the federal government's $2 billion housing infrastructure fund will still lead to a net increase of 30,000 homes. So it's going to be a wild ride in the property market. So there's still going to be, despite the Albanese government's claim that they've got migration under control, yet at the same time they still praise the contribution of recent migrants and multiculturalism. They want to have it both ways. Can housing prices, can they plummet if there's still so many people arriving into Australia?
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, if you wanted a good laugh, forget the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. Just tune in to Senate estimates last week and this week because you get a good laugh. Because we had the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, Dr. Anna Cody, before Senate estimates, who, of course, it's in her submission to the Tickle versus Giggle case, defended the Ms. Roxanne Tickle's claim of discrimination based on gender identity. Now, Dr. Anna Cody has previously refused to identify biological sex. Now she's gone viral all around the world for her answer to the question that trans women can claim unlawful discrimination on the basis of potential pregnancy. And I've also included in this comedy montage Malcolm Roberts questioning the Office for Women about what is a woman. And then I've included Patricia Karvelis, host of the ABC's Background Briefing, interviewing Anthony Albanese and the Shadow Minister for Women, Melissa McIntosh, on changing the Sex Discrimination Act to actually define biological sex.
Did you ask the federal court to extend pregnancy protections to transgender women?
Senator, not from my recollection.
No, sorry, I'm asking. I was wanting to understand the status of your submission.
No, in the submissions we talked about the meaning of pregnancy and potential pregnancy and how that may apply
So
to
can I ask,
gender identity.
how do you see that applying in the Act currently to trans women?
Trans women, if someone is who applies for a job, for example,
yes,
and it is a trans woman and she may be asked whether or not she intends to have children, and if she replies, yes, I do, and then doesn't get the job because that employer doesn't want to employ women who may be of childbearing age, then she may have been subjected to unlawful discrimination on the basis of potential pregnancy.
I'm very confused. A biological male can't become pregnant.
But the grounds of pregnancy includes potential pregnancy as well as pregnancy.
But if they can't become pregnant, how can you then become potentially pregnant?
It's about the unlawful treatment by the employer. If someone is treated unfairly on the basis of pregnancy or potential pregnancy, then that is unlawful discrimination on the basis of pregnancy.
So if a bloke came in and they said, are you going to have children? Which is the same question really, and he said, oh, yeah, maybe. Are you saying that he could also claim that ground?
If he didn't receive the job because...
But they can't get pregnant?
No, not a man who is seeking a position, then it's not going to apply to a man.
Well, they're both biological men. It makes no sense. A biological man, you stated before, a biological man can't get pregnant, am I correct? Because if I'm not, I've got to go back to school. I seriously do, because I missed that lesson in biology. I went to a convent school, the nuns may not have told me about it. But you said a biological man can't get pregnant.
That's correct, Senator. But someone who is a trans woman may be assumed to be pregnant or to be able to be pregnant.
Does the Office for Women stand with biological women, or does this office also include men identifying as women?
We stand with all women, Senator.
So that's biological women?
What does that term even mean? It's a ridiculous question.
Said all women, Senator Roberts.
So I stand
You're trying to create
safe spaces for women. I want women's rights back.
How about you leave that up to us to figure out for ourselves?
Well, that's what I'm doing, and they're coming to me saying, for goodness sake, pursue this issue with the Office for Women. Senator Cash knows all about it. That's exactly what we're doing. So I stand for women's rights as hard fought for and won by the feminist movement decades ago. Do you believe that a man that is born with male genitals and male chromosomes can be anything other than a male?
This is a medical question, Senator Roberts. You're better off in the Health Department, which is next week.
The Coalition has been saying they want to change the Sex Discrimination Act to redefine women as biological women. Do you think that should happen?
Oh, look, I'm not engaging in culture wars here. What my priority has been is bringing down the budget and discussing those issues.
They say lots of women want these spaces and
that's
they're
my
not safe.
priority. Look, we have a major program of women's safety and $4.4 billion of investment. It's the biggest investment that we have had, that any government has ever had.
So no appetite for changing the definition?
And that's what, no, I'm concerned about issues that Australians are concerned about.
I found it really interesting that the Prime Minister just told about 13 million women and girls that their rights are merely a culture war. This is about women's rights and women that do care about this issue around biological sex and women and the Sex Discrimination Act. He just basically just go away. This is not a priority for me. And I think Australian women would have every right to be pretty angry at this Prime Minister for his reaction, because he's not even engaging.
Now, it's worth mentioning that Patricia Karvelas, who hosts ABC Background Briefing and its Politics Now podcast, which I listen to, is, and to use Katie Hopkins' pronunciation, a lesbian. And does Patricia Karvelas' definition of lesbian include lesbians with penises? I would like to see her answer that question. She did a Four Corners episode a while back on the controversy of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones in young people. Now, going back to Dr. Anna Cody, she did an op-ed in the Australian today claiming that the most important priority for women's safety is violence against women and girls. And I saw an apologist for Dr. Anna Cody on X who says that what she meant to say, except she didn't explain it very well is that a potential employer may think, because we have gender self-ID in Australia, that might believe that a trans woman is a biological woman because they pass so well. Think of the actor Hunter Schafer, who obviously transitioned, took puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones as a child, and passes as a it's not an obvious trans woman like Roxanne Tickle. So what Dr. Anna Cody meant to say is that a trans woman in a job interview may pass so well that a employer may assume that they're a biological woman and can become pregnant. That's why she meant by a potential pregnancy. So that is what Dr. Anna Cody apparently meant to say. Now, obviously, Angus Taylor and the Nationals leader Matt Canavan have pledged to amend the Sex Discrimination Act to include biological women. To actually define woman as based in biology, I should say. And Alison Penfold's national backbencher has introduced a private members bill, except the coalition is not going to get any credit for this because it's a policy which One Nation has been consistent on for a decade. Pauline Hanson, she put forward a motion in the Senate to a federal inquiry into cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers in children. The now Deputy Liberal leader Jane Hume, back then I think she was just a backbencher, voted against it. And Australian voters have we've just had another opinion poll drop, the Sky News YouGov Pulse, which has One Nation as the most popular party, 29%, Labor at 26%, and the Coalition at 20%. So Tony Abbott's not going to save it. But two-party preferred, Labor is still ahead, both against the Coalition and One Nation. Albanese has a slim lead as preferred Prime Minister over Angus Taylor, 41-39, and against Pauline Hanson, 47-41, though he has a -24 approval rating. So that is another poll confirming that One Nation is Australia's number one party.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
And now, going on to... Hang on, I've got the wrong... Just give me a moment here. I've made an error here. I'll just go back to... Oh, wait, I know. Let's go back to this. Now, two-tier Britain. It is a deadly and unjust system. And the most recent victim of two-tier policing in the most horrific way possible is Henry Novak, an 18-year-old university student in Southampton, which is in Britain's far south. He was walking home after a night out and was murdered by 23-year-old Vikram Digwa, who stabbed Henry 5 times using a 21 centimetre blade, a large Sikh ceremonial knife. Novak had filmed Digwa in a Snapchat video earlier before the murder, showing the weapon, which was not concealed. It was hanging off him. So Vikram Digwa then chased and attacked Henry. He tried to flee, climbed a fence, and was bleeding heavily. Neighbours heard him calling for help. Now, Digwa's brother called the police and falsely claimed Novak had racially abused, assaulted him, and started a fight. And Digwa's turban was apparently dislodged. Now, Digwa's mother hid the knife. Hampshire police arrived and spoke to both of them. They believed Digwa's account. They handcuffed and arrested Novak, treating him as the perpetrator suspect, despite Novak repeatedly saying he'd been stabbed and I can't breathe, I've been stabbed. The body cam footage, which I'm not going to show because it's too distressing and makes me too angry. One of the male officers, we don't know any of the officers' identity, their faces are blurred. He says, "I don't think you have been, mate." It took them 3 minutes to realise that he had been stabbed, removed the handcuffs and called for an ambulance, started CPR, but he lost consciousness and died at the scene. Now, Vikram Digwa was legally permitted to carry a smaller Kirpan knife under UK law as a practicing Sikh. So this is beautiful Henry Novak on the right, just 18 years old, his whole life ahead of him, brutally taken away from him by this lying murderer, Vikram Digwa. Sikhs have a religious exemption under the Criminal Justice Act, but apparently the larger Shasta blade he used to murder Henry Novak went beyond typical religious requirements. They should have no exemption because if they want to come to Britain, they should assimilate and abide by the law as like every other Brit. And other Brits aren't allowed to legally carry a knife. The Sikhs also want exemptions from motorbike, bicycle helmet laws because of their turbans. Again, if the rest of the population is mandated to wear a helmet, then so should they. The country shouldn't assimilate to them. They should assimilate to the country. Now, thankfully, because the Digwa family are not good liars, their lies and slurs against the murdered Henry Novak, they unravelled at the trial. He was found guilty by a jury, got life imprisonment, but only with a 21-year non-parole period, which is grossly inadequate. He should have got life without parole because of the savagery of that murder. He had a fascination with knives from the age of 12, so it clearly went beyond the regular Sikh fascination with lives. His mother, Kiran Kaur, who hid and removed the murder knife, has been convicted of assisting an offender. Now, there is white-hot anger about this in Britain, and pun entirely intended. Now, the Hampshire police officers who handcuffed a bleeding Henry Novak. We don't know their names. We should. So the Independent Office of Police Conduct is actively investigating the unnamed officer's actions, including the handcuffing and initial assessment. Now, this is a statement from a Hampshire police officer who, well, let's see how much weasel words is used in this.
Today is the first time I can speak to you properly about the murder of Henry Novak in Southampton after a jury convicted his killer. First and foremost, this is an unspeakable tragedy, and I cannot begin to imagine what Henry's family have suffered. We've not spoken about this before today, as it was vitally important to us that nothing be published which could prejudice the trial and prevent justice from happening. I am deeply sorry that Henry could not be saved. I'm sorry that in the moments before he lost consciousness, he had been handcuffed and arrested. The facts heard in court should leave no doubt in anyone's mind who was lying to officers that night and why we didn't immediately understand what had happened. During the 999 call, when officers first arrived at the scene, and even when Henry's condition was deteriorating quickly, his killer continued to divert the blame, obstruct our inquiries, and never admit the serious harm which had been done. I understand that there are many questions about what happened on the night of Wednesday, the 3rd of December 2025. In those moments, the officers who attended didn't have all of the information we have today. They were called to a report of an assault and told a man was being detained at the scene. These details were immediately repeated to officers as they arrived. The attending officers sought to take control of a complex situation, and based on what they had been told, they placed Henry in handcuffs and told him he was under arrest. But within 3 minutes of arriving, they realised the severity of his condition, the handcuffs were removed, an ambulance was called, and they started CPR. The horrendous injuries Henry suffered were internal. The pathologist's evidence at court was clear. Sadly, nothing we could have done that night would have saved him. His wound was difficult to find and had caused a significant amount of internal bleeding. As people worked to try and save him, 3 people were arrested at the scene, including the man now convicted of his murder. A 4th person was arrested at a nearby address. My officers responded swiftly to a situation which was confusing and unclear, and within minutes were giving Henry first aid and trying to save his life. The following day, we referred the incident to the Independent Office of Police Conduct, who've been conducting an independent investigation into our response. We are committed to acting on their findings. Henry Novak was an 18-year-old who had his whole future in front of him. That future has been cut short through a senseless attack. Today, the person who's responsible for killing Henry has rightly been convicted of his murder.
So, sorry, not sorry. Henry was going to die anyway from his wounds, the pathologist said. But what if he could have been saved? What if the handcuffs are what killed him? And basically, this constable basically says that the police officers were right to believe the lying murderer. Now, this statement seemed to me like it was an Andrew Lawrence sketch about Detective Sergeant Peter Pisspot, and there was not much difference in Andrew Lawrence's video and that of the actual constable.
Constable Detective Officer Peter Pisspot from Twat Valley Police. Assalamu alaikum. By now, many of you will be aware of an unfortunate incident involving white Southampton University student Henry Novak. After receiving reports of vile racist abuse against a poor oppressed Sikh gentleman, 3 extremely well-trained female police officers, who were certainly not diversity hires, arrived at the scene to find the alleged racist Henry Novak lying in a pool of his own blood. Naturally, before the attending officers could concern themselves with that, it was vital that they ascertained explained whether he was racist or not. When Novak complained that he'd been stabbed and couldn't breathe, one officer chuckled and said, "I don't think you have," before the three of them dragged him along the ground and handcuffed him, where they left him to bleed out and die while they tried to ascertain just how racist he was. As it transpired, the Sikh gentleman had stabbed Novak multiple times in self-defence with his perfectly lawful sharpened ceremonial knife that he was carrying strictly for religious purposes, and there had in fact been no racist attack at all. Police rigorously checked both Novak and Novak's father's phone for evidence of racist communications and could sadly find absolutely nothing. As it turns out, the Sikh gentleman had been lying to the police all along. The officers in attendance could not possibly have anticipated that. It's almost unheard of for a criminal to lie about a crime they've just committed. The Sikh gentleman was of course a vulnerable ethnic minority, and so of course it was natural for the attending officers to assume he was the victim in all of this. And of course, just because no evidence whatsoever exists of Novak's racism, that doesn't necessarily mean that Novak wasn't racist. He may well have been having racist thoughts in his head at the time when he was stabbed. We'll never know. The important thing to remember is that if you are a young white male in Britain now, you are very much a second-class citizen. And if you do find yourself in a situation where someone's tried to murder you, you must be ready to present compelling evidence that you are not a racist before police officers will offer you any kind of medical assistance. That's all just part and parcel of living in diverse, multicultural Britain. Stay safe out there. Assalamu alaikum. Namaste. Kumbaya. I'm now on to...
So they're basically the same video. And Andrew Lawrence, he is correct in that video that Indigenous white Brits are now second-class citizens. And UK police have been trained to basically not to appear that they are racist to any non-white person, which is why they automatically believed the lying murderer. Now, Henry Novak's father said the way that the police treated his dying son was inhumane and degrading, as he has called for the government to treat knife crime as a national emergency. And there was a protest outside the court at the injustice. Now, there's a lot of people in the comments criticizing me for not showing the body cam footage. You can see it online. As I said previously, it just gets me too distressed, too angry, and obviously many would argue we should be angry. This is a absolute fucked up injustice. When I first heard that the British police handcuffed a bleeding white man because his murderer had accused him of racism, this is the sort of thing which you think could happen in an absurd moment. Now, of course, there was another person 6 years ago who said, "I can't breathe." George Floyd, a career criminal who was black. And there were riots across the United States. There was the decapitation, sawing down of old British statues, throwing them in the Thames River. Then opposition leader Keir Starmer took the knee for Black Lives Matter. Now, white people here, they aren't going to riot, nor should they. What's going to be achieved by burning down businesses and destroying property? And it's also worth pointing out, after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, white people didn't riot. Instead, they grieved, prayed, went to church, unlike what happened when Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968. There was riots across the United States. So, but you can imagine, say, if the victim in this case had been a black Jamaican or a black Nigerian, there would have been nationwide riots across the United Kingdom. Now, Nigel Farage released a video saying white lives matter too, but the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, criticised him, saying all lives matter. And she said that she could, she tried to imagine if Henry was her son. Well, Henry wouldn't be her son because Kemi Badenoch's children are black. And so how can she put herself in Henry's parents' shoes there? Because obviously her children, I mean, they're half white, but they're physically black. They're not going to be victims of anti-white racism. And so she has failed the leadership test, decided to say, well, all lives matter, and Nigel Farage is wrong to make this about race. The murderer made this about race. And of course, Kemi Badenoch, even though she was born in England, that's only because her Nigerian mother hovered her vagina over England when she was born. She was raised in Lagos, Nigeria, but decided to utilize her British birthright citizenship and moved to Britain as a teenager. Maybe if the circumstances were different in Nigeria, maybe she'd be a Nigerian MP at the moment. She identifies as a Yoruba woman, which is a ethnic tribe in Nigeria, and she was the last leader to publicly comment on the murder of Henry Novak. Even Keir Starmer, the original author of two-tier justice as the director of the Crown Prosecution Service, he put out a social media statement saying, this is a awful, shocking case. Henry's loved ones have gone through the trauma of a long trial and endured Henry's killer, making up appalling claims about their son, who was a thoughtful, kind, and deeply loved. It is right that the IOPC is investigating the police's response to his senseless murder, and we must end the cycle of tragedy by tackling the horror of knife crime. Well, how about ending the exemption for Sikhs to carry knives? Henry's family, friends, and his university and the city of Southampton will continue to feel his loss, and our thoughts will always be with them. And he also put out a statement after 3 unnamed teenage rapists were given community corrections orders by this judge at the Southampton Crown Court, Nicholas Rowland, a white judge. He gave these teenage rapists who raped 2 teenage girls in separate attacks, age 14 and 15, gave them youth rehabilitation orders of 18 months to 3 years. So this includes supervision, curfews, and other requirements, only placed on the sex offenders register for 10 years, to pay a £26 victim surcharge, and the judge cited their young age, lack of prior big trouble, desire to avoid criminalising these children unnecessarily. They committed a horrific crime of rape. and focus on rehabilitation, reintegration over custody. Now, Keir Starmer linked to a BBC interview with one of the teenage victims, and you know that this is scandalous when the BBC report on an unjust sentence. So Keir Starmer said, "This is a harrowing and brave testimony. The girls at the heart of this case have shown extraordinary bravery and strength in heinous circumstances. This is an appalling case, and it is right that law officers are urgently reviewing the sentences." So the Attorney General has appealed to the Court of Appeal. Now, again, because they're minors, we don't know their names or their race. Now, the reason why Keir Starmer is commenting on these two injustices is not because of some profound personal conviction. It's because Nigel Farage is leading in the polls. And I think we might soon see the Albanese government begin to change tack with One Nation leading in the polls. We already have Anthony Albanese talking about progressive patriotism. So as going into the details of these horrific gang rapes, let's call them what they are. One attack involved a knife. The boys filmed the rapes, including laughing during them, and shared the footage. Prosecutors called them premeditated, brazen, group offending. Now, the British legal system has named youth offenders convicted of murder, and so should name those convicted of rape as well. Now, I'll tell you why, the reason why Keir Starmer, he himself has created this absolute unjust Britain. It's not just because he was the director of the Crown Prosecution Service when the grooming gangs were running rampant, and also failed to prosecute a elite known pedophile Jimmy Savile. It's also because after Axel Rudabagana murdered 3 little girls in a Islamist terror attack, he directed the courts to immediately prosecute and send to prison for multiple years the people who'd posted online, like Lucy Connolly, for 2 years. And so you had these pompous judges like Nicholas Rowland. I don't know whether he sentenced one of these sentenced to prison over social media posts, but they all look the same. You saw the vision of these pompous white judges in their wigs giving the sentence, claiming that a custodial sentence is immediately what is needed. So Keir Starmer has contributed to the current circumstances, and Nigel Farage, he is wanting to this be a turning point and wants cultural change in the police force. He has released not just a social media video, but done an emergency broadcast. So I think Nigel Farage's reaction has been strong and is what is needed. And now more examples of two-tier justice. Remember these Pakistani brothers. Have I got the photo here? Where'd it go? Here we go, here. So remember them, Muhammad Fahir Ahmaz and Muhammad Ahmed. So remember, they punched and assaulted police officers at Manchester Airport. And they were, remember, they claimed to be the victims, amazingly. Now, only one of the brothers was convicted of a crime. So Armaz was convicted in July 2025 of assaulting the two female police officers and common assault of the public. He remains in sentencing, but the prosecution of the main charge of assaulting a male police officer, so two separate juries in Liverpool failed to release verdicts, and the Commonwealth Prosecution Service decided to not seek a third retrial. But it was only because there was outrage, i.e. when the full CCTV footage was released of the brothers throwing these punches. They claimed that, of course, they were the victims, that they were acting in self-defense. But again, the truth came out. But you have enough in these areas, enough diverse juries that they couldn't be convicted of the most serious charges. Anna says Farage is a Tory, Tim. I know that Farage is an aristocrat, and that's why I have been critical of him for his lies about Tommy Robinson. This is why Pauline Hanson is way more authentic, small business owner, fish and chip shop owner. She attended the first March for Australia in August 2025. Nigel Farage would never attend such a rally. She spoke at the Put Australia First rally and at the Australia Lobby Group's first rally. So Pauline Hanson, she's prepared to go to these rallies while Farage isn't. But he is the best hope for Britain. Obviously Rupert Lowe and Restore are far superior, but it hasn't broken through in the polls as the way that Reform have. But going back to the point that I'm making here, that two-tier Britain, the only time that there is a huge punishment is if it's a social media hate crime, or if it's a crime against a so-called celebrity, particularly at the BBC. Remember, Alex Belfield is back in prison for supposedly breaching his parole. Remember, he was convicted of stalking BBC Radio and Channel 5 host Jeremy Vine, even though he never went to his home because Jeremy Vine is a protected species. And remember, Gavin Plum was imprisoned for not planning to kidnap the ITV presenter Holly Willoughby, but for fantasizing about it on a WhatsApp group called Abduct Your Lovers. And remember, Gavin Plum was so fat that he had to give up his job as a pizza delivery driver, and probably because he ate them all and couldn't fit out his front door. And his plan was to poll vote into Holly Willoughby's home. If he'd done that, it would have caused an earthquake. I think Holly Willoughby would have known that somebody had breached her perimeter. But he was prosecuted to basically make the public more sympathetic to Holly Willoughby after she had appeared to turn a blind eye to her supposed best friend, co-presenter Philip Schofield, who'd been bumming the young runner Matthew McGreevy. So two-tier justice is also about protecting the celebrity class as well. Now, even though Britain is bad, and probably urge Indigenous white Brits to get out of there now and migrate to Australia. It's not as bad here. I know Blair Cottrell made a video saying that it was. Obviously, if you're not a Nazi, it's Australia is nowhere near as bad as Britain. Again, not that I support the laws against the White Australia National Socialist Network, but certainly I think that you're more safe from persecution here in Australia than you are in Britain. But even though Britain is a sick society now, France is worse. Now, the Champions League final between Arsenal, which is based in North London, and Paris Saint-Germain. Paris Saint-Germain won back-to-back Champions League trophies, and there was a second riot in Paris. Now, rioting is part of French culture, but it's political. Like if they are going to raise the pension age, there's a riot. But this rioting also turns into looting of businesses. And this is their team one. And this is what happened last year as well. Now, in North London, there was no rioting. There wouldn't have been a rioting if Arsenal had won. When Arsenal won the Premier League title, there was spontaneous street celebrations, but it didn't turn into a riot. The open parade for the Arsenal winning the Premier League, there was no mass violence. So certainly you would say that Paris is much worse than London. Now, even though Emmanuel Macron is a lame duck president, he has promised to come down hard on these rioters. 780 have been arrested, which is a good start. Obviously, he wants to have a presidential successor. Marine Le Pen has said that this was not a celebration. This is the result of mass-controlled immigration. So Emmanuel Macron, like Keir Starmer, is now forced into saying that he's going to crack down on these lawless rioters. Anna says, Tim, just because it isn't as bad here as in England doesn't mean we should want more immigration. Oh, well, would you be comfortable with white Brits coming in? That's my question to you. And the point that I'm making is that surely white Brits who don't feel safe in their own country, they would have no problem assimilating into the Australian culture. We have a lot of Brits who have migrated here and who are in the Patriot movement, such as Gary Hume and Iron Duke 99, to name a couple. We are certainly richer for their contributions. So certainly, when I say I'm for net zero migration, I certainly want the migrants who are coming in, which should be severely curtailed. We should be a lot more selective. Anna says, Tim, Paris is the result of multiculturalism. It doesn't matter what I say. 1984 is upon us. Yeah. Paris is no longer the city of love. Fuck that. It's the city of crime. If you're going to go to Paris, don't go to Paris for nostalgic reasons because of the Notre Dame or all that romantic crap. You're more likely to get pickpocketed, assaulted by a migrant. Don't go there. It's not safe.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, let's finish off with some good news. So there was 7 Laotian miners trapped in a flooded cave, and the good news is that 5 have been rescued. You may remember in 2018 the 12 Thai cave boys and their coach were rescued from a Thai flooded cave, because when it's wet season in Thailand and Laos, it rains and flash flooding is very rapid. So we're all sending our love down the cave. I'm always reminded of that Simpsons episode about Timmy O'Toole falling down the well, and all the Springfield celebrities are all saying, "We're sending our love down the well." And that's what it reminds me of, these cave rescues. So remind me next time I go to Thailand or Laos not to go into a cave, even though I am going during the dry season. But I did have a cocktail when I was in Vientiane, the capital of Laos, because I do like to live dangerously, though if I was going to die from that cocktail, so would 200 other diners at that restaurant, and everyone else who'd been there throughout the evening. Obviously, Thailand and Laos, you don't need to worry about machete wielding gangs breaking into your home in the middle of the night, because they're both socially cohesive monocultures and who actually have nationalistic pride and want to keep their nations the same, though you are more likely to die in a traffic accident, I would say. Now, I'm excited about premiering this Thursday is Scary Movie 6. So if you're a fan of the Scary Movie parodies, it is back, and it's been written by the Wayans brothers again, who wrote and acted in the first 2. So Marlon and Sean Wayans. And if you've seen any of the trailers, it looks absolutely hilarious. Now, even though Marlon Wayans has a transgender child, a daughter who says, "I'm now your son," it's still going to be massively politically incorrect and anti-woke, the movie. Just in the trailer, it shows Ghostface stabbing a black woman in the subway, and a passenger says, "He stabbed her," and she says, "Not her, my pronouns are they, them. He stabbed them." So Marlon Wayans' personal life is not affecting his jokes. They're basically like the Wayans family. They're like the Jackson family of comedy, and they are going to make fun of the new Michael biopic as well. So it's about time we had some old school anti-woke hilarious comedy. And there's Special Officer Doofy Gilmore is coming back. Remember, that was considered politically incorrect for making fun of a mental disability. Special Officer Doofy reporting for duty. "Don't disturb me, but I'm cleaning my room." And also Hanson with his little strong hand is coming back as well from the second movie. But Miss Man, the transgender gym teacher, is not coming back because the actress Miss Man was actually played by a biological woman, Jane Triker, who was a bodybuilder. So they were prosthetic testicles that hit Cindy Campbell. So not only Cindy and Brenda back, but so are Shorty and Ray. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. That brings us to the end of the show tonight. Thank you so much for company once again. And as you all know by now, I am a contributor to Reality Check Radio as part of its Australian expansion. So they have launched an Australian version of their Bytes newsletter called, which you can subscribe to at biteme.news. On Friday night, I interviewed my RCR Australia colleague, Lisa Jane Spencer, who's now a presenter with her own show. Joins Graham Hoodie Hood, the Qantas pilot who quit because of the vaccine mandates. Please, I can't do all of this without your support, so please consider supporting the Unshackled with a membership at theunshackled.net/membership or over on Substack, theunshackled.substack.com/subscribe. Now, there'll be another new report from Tiger Mountain, which will be featuring Richard Wollstonecroft, which will be published very soon. I'm just so busy at the moment, but I'm still committed to bringing you WilmsFront Snapshot News every Tuesday night. So I will see you all again next week on Tuesday evening. Thank you so much for watching. Please, everyone, even though we've covered some real depressing and angering news tonight, try not to let it get you down. We are still in exciting times here in Australia. All hope is not lost. And I certainly think that we are going to see some progress in Australia. So I think that there's still some brightness ahead of us. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com to view the archive of episodes, and keep visiting theunshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with